We have millions of yards of dirt that needs to get moved every year, or else it's going to just load up the last few years. And that makes me really nervous if something goes wrong, right?
Every mining season starts with the same ticking clock. Millions of cubic yards of dirt have to be moved on time, without failure, or the entire operation collapses under its own weight. That kind of pressure doesn't just threaten profits, it threatens everything. And for Parker Schnabel, it came down to just 20 minutes. The razor-thin margin between total disaster and a $75 million breakthrough. "Parker, you need to see this," they said. What he was shown wasn't just land. It was opportunity. Thick, heavy ground, perfect for stacking over the existing cut. The kind of material miners dream about. Parker didn't hesitate. He knew instantly. This changed everything. People think gold mining is about luck or massive machines. This story proves it's neither. It was a silent war, fought through leaked paperwork, forgotten journals from the 1980s, and a frantic race that felt more like a high-speed chase than a mining operation. Before we break it all down, make sure you subscribe, because stories like this never make headlines, and once you see how close Parker came to losing it all, you'll understand why this season changed mining history forever.
Parker, you want to look at this one? This is your baby. It's your new ground, and that ground over there is really, really chunky. We're going to throw this on top of it. Wow, sweet.
Rick Ness was suddenly banned, his entire operation frozen. But that didn't mean he was finished. What no one fully grasped yet was that the land itself was shifting, and when it stopped, only one miner would still be standing. With cameras blacked out and equipment silent, Rick didn't just lose permission to mine, he was hit with a restriction unlike anything ever issued in the Yukon. 1 minute, he was preparing for the biggest push of his season. The next, everything unraveled because of a document that was never supposed to surface. Rick knew the gold was there, but until it showed up in the sluice, doubt always lingered. He wasn't chasing certainty, he just needed to see it with his own eyes. Then the leak surfaced, a confidential compliance memo with no signature, no stamp, no traceable origin. It appeared online late at night, dated months before permits were even available. Right in the center, bold and unmistakable, were words no active miner had ever seen attached to their name. Pre-disqualified Rick Ness. Whoever wrote it assumed it would stay hidden. They were wrong. Stranger still was the violation code listed, numbers that didn't exist anywhere in Yukon mining law. Regulators and retired inspectors combed through decades of records and found nothing. It was as if the rule had been invented quietly, slipped into the system long before Rick ever set foot on the claim. Whispers spread. Was this real enforcement or a legal ambush planned in advance? The leak didn't blow up all at once. It drifted quietly through inboxes and late-night chats. Rick stayed focused, saying his top priority was getting to the bottom of the cut. They were finally close to the rim. But everything shifted the moment the memo landed on the desk of Parker Schnabel's geological strategist. A call went out immediately, not to Parker, but to one of his senior crew members. The message was simple. Watch the eastern boundary at sunrise. No details. By morning, rumors were everywhere. Something major had been triggered, and no one knew if it was an accident, a setup, or the start of a takeover. Meanwhile, Parker's drone team noticed something disturbing. Rick's wash plant cameras weren't down. They were frozen, locked on the same frame from 16 hours earlier. Fuel barrels sat abandoned, conveyors untouched, hoses dropped mid-shift. This wasn't a planned shutdown, it was abrupt. Parker didn't comment. He didn't even study the footage. Instead, he walked to the seismic monitor, equipment most crews ignore because it's hard to interpret. He zoomed in on the boundary between his claim and Rick's. Deep underground, something heavy was moving. Not machinery, not surface vibration, but the unmistakable signal of Earth settling after a disturbance. Calmly, Parker ordered a monitoring team, though everyone could hear the tension beneath his voice. He wasn't reacting to an opportunity, he was recognizing a scenario he'd anticipated. The signals pulsed steadily, like a heartbeat from underground. Whatever was happening was significant. Parker knew the land was shifting, but he didn't know Rick had already launched his counterstrike. By midnight, Rick's crew gathered in a dark equipment shed, lit only by headlamps reflecting off rusted steel. The generators were dead, the claim silent. Rick held up the ban notice on a cracked tablet, rotating it so everyone could see the fuzzy digital signature, clearly auto-generated, the kind used on drafts, not enforceable orders. They never signed it, Rick said. Someone didn't want to. One mechanic stepped forward, shaken. Earlier, he'd overheard a board agent rushing a phone call, mentioning a name that wasn't on any public list. They said the shutdown had to happen before the window closed. At first, he thought they meant the weather. Now he wasn't so sure. Rick understood the urgency. A rushed ban meant one of two things. Either he'd hit something incredibly valuable, or someone needed him gone before he did. The crew moved fast. If the order stood, even briefly, the board could legally seize all geological data. So they split up, slipping into the dark, gathering every core sample, logbook, vial, and seismic record they had. Whatever was coming next, Rick Ness wasn't about to lose the proof. The samples were packed into an aging utility truck with its headlights taped over, and Rick immediately ordered radio silence. Any open channel could be traced. GPS units were flipped into encrypted mode, something he'd only ever done once before. As the truck rolled out carrying the proof, Rick paused, staring across the valley at the distant glow of Parker's operation. He had no idea yet about the leaked memo, the fake violation code, or the seismic shifts Parker had already spotted. What he did know, without a shred of doubt, was that someone wanted him erased, not slowed down, not scaled back, but completely removed. And while the Yukon slept beneath the pale shimmer of the northern lights, two mining operations were quietly accelerating toward impact. Rick protected those core samples like courtroom evidence, unaware that Parker had already picked up the first signal of a rare geological pattern that only reveals itself once in a generation. That missing piece surfaced through an old, forgotten journal. Cracked leather cover, yellowed pages, coordinates scribbled in the margins, pulled from an estate box, bought at auction by a retired prospector. Inside was a description geologists swear shouldn't exist, a warped sub-channel that twisted and doubled back on itself, forming natural gold traps capable of storing riches for thousands of years. The rough sketch matched perfectly with Rick's final drill hole before his shutdown. Neither man had known this link existed. As Rick read the journal in the dim truck cab, it became clear. The ban wasn't about rules. It was a calculated freeze meant to stop him just short of the exact spot the journal warned about, repeating one line over and over. Once it bends, it empties. Meanwhile, across the valley, tension inside Parker's command trailer sharpened when an anonymous text arrived. His claim isn't protected. Time is running out. No context, no signature, but Parker didn't need one. He glanced back at the seismic data and activated a protocol he hadn't touched in years. Operation Aftershock, a rapid land positioning maneuver designed to move before anyone realized the ground had shifted. Crews redeployed instantly, dozers rerouted, wash plants mobilized, schedules torn apart. Mid-season moves like this were unheard of, but Parker trusted the chain reaction forming in front of him. Rick was deciphering the map. Parker was redrawing it. When Rick was summoned to what was labeled a temporary status justification hearing, he knew something was wrong. Those hearings were reserved for disasters, not paperwork disputes. The room was stiff, scripted, uncomfortable. When Rick demanded evidence, hesitation filled the silence until one board member slipped and admitted the issue wasn't Rick's actions, but his location. In that moment, everything snapped into focus. This was about territory. As Rick walked out, his phone rang. A retired mining inspector using coded language. "Protocol 7B, he said. "No one files that unless they're hiding a land shift." A microscopic tectonic movement had nudged boundary markers just enough to reroute projected gold corridors on official maps, placing the richest zone right along Parker's line. Rick went into full forensic mode, assembling years of samples, charts, scans, and sketches into an airtight case. At the same time, Parker's team compiled ultra-precise LiDAR data suggesting the corridor dipped only under his land. One dataset had to be wrong or manipulated. When both men arrived before the board, digital models clashed with handwritten journals, accusations flew, and the truth split into two incompatible realities. With no legal clarity left, the board invoked the final option, a provisional extraction test. Whoever exposed the corridor first would own it. Words were done. Machines would decide. The valley exploded into motion. Parker cut with surgical precision, recalibrating constantly. Rick went vertical, drilling straight into the heart of the channel. Both crews pushed to the brink, and then it happened. Parker's system roared as gold-coated boulders slammed through his plant, while Rick's drill erupted in a geyser of black sand and chunky nuggets. Simultaneous discoveries, no debate, just proof. But proof wasn't enough. Timing was everything. Two trucks raced toward Dawson, fate rattling in the passenger seats. In the end, it came down to 17 minutes. Parker's samples hit the desk first, granting him full rights to the corridor. Rick's ban was overturned, and his geology, Rick Ness, won the truth. The core samples were quietly packed into a battered utility truck, its headlights carefully masked so they wouldn't cast light across the valley. Rick gave a sharp order. All radio chatter stops now. Any active frequency could be tracked, and tonight was not the night to be found. GPS units were switched into encrypted mode, a contingency Rick had only activated once before, during a situation he never liked to remember. As the truck growled to life and rolled out, carrying months of work, Rick stayed behind for a few seconds, standing alone in the cold. From where he was, he could see the faint glow of Parker's operation across the valley. He didn't yet know about the leaked memo, the violation code that didn't exist in any law book, or the strange seismic readings Parker had already picked up. But he knew something just as powerful. Someone wasn't trying to slow him down. They weren't trying to negotiate. They wanted him erased completely. And while the Yukon slept beneath the pale shimmer of the northern lights, two mining operations were quietly accelerating toward a collision that would decide everything. Rick treated those core samples like evidence in a criminal case. Every tube, every vial, every logged measurement mattered. What he didn't realize was that Parker had already noticed the earliest signal of a geological pattern so rare, most miners only ever hear about it in theory. The missing piece surfaced far from the claims, inside a forgotten leather-bound journal with brittle, yellowed pages. It came from a box of estate documents, bought at auction by a retired prospector who didn't even realize what he had found. Inside were hand-sketched maps, frantic notes, and coordinates scribbled into the margins. The descriptions inside challenged everything modern Yukon geology insisted was impossible, a distorted sub-channel that bent, folded back on itself, and shifted direction every few hundred feet, forming natural gold traps capable of storing massive wealth for thousands of years. One rough sketch matched exactly with the final drill hole Rick had completed before his operation went dark. Neither Rick nor Parker knew it yet, but that journal was the bridge connecting both of their discoveries. Rick sat in the dim cab of his truck, slowly turning those pages. The ban suddenly made sense. This wasn't about safety or compliance. It was a tactical freeze, timed to stop him just before he reached the precise point the journal hinted at. One phrase appeared 3 separate times in the same handwriting. Once it bends, it empties. Rick didn't fully understand the mechanics, but instinct told him enough. Somewhere beneath their feet was a corridor that broke the rules, and someone powerful knew exactly where it was. Across the valley, Parker's mobile command trailer had shifted from routine efficiency into controlled chaos. A single anonymous text had just appeared on his phone. His claim isn't protected. Clock is running. No explanation followed, but none was needed. Parker glanced back at the seismic monitor, then activated a protocol he hadn't used in years. Operation Aftershock. It was a land positioning maneuver designed for moments when opportunity appeared before boundaries could be questioned. Crews were redeployed instantly, dozers redirected, wash plants disconnected and moved. Schedules were rewritten on the fly. Mid-season shifts like this almost never happened, but Parker trusted the pattern forming in front of him. Rick was trying to interpret the map. Parker was already reshaping it with steel and diesel. Rick soon found himself summoned to what was officially labeled a temporary status justification hearing. That alone raised alarms. Those hearings were reserved for catastrophic failures, not seasonal disputes. The room felt staged, too quiet, too rigid, papers aligned with unnatural precision. Rick sat down and let the silence stretch. When he finally asked for the evidence supporting the ban, hesitation filled the room. One official shuffled documents without looking up. Another cleared her throat. Then a board member slipped, admitting the problem wasn't Rick's actions, but his claim's location. That single word changed everything. This wasn't about risk, it was about territory. Rick walked out, knowing the ban had been a move on a larger board. Minutes later, his phone rang. The caller was a retired territorial mining inspector who'd lost his career after crossing the wrong donor. He spoke in coded language. "Protocol 7B, he said. "No one files that unless they're hiding a land shift." Rick felt his stomach drop. A tiny tectonic microslip, barely detectable, had nudged boundary markers just enough to reroute projected gold corridors on paper. On updated maps, the richest zone now leaned toward Parker's side of the line. Rick rushed back to his workspace and went into full investigative mode, pulling seismic charts, density scans, drill logs, hand sketches, and modern overlays, assembling a case that looked more like a criminal investigation than a mining report. At the same time, Parker's camp was preparing its own scientific weaponry. Continuous drone-mounted LiDAR sweeps stitched together ultra-precise terrain models showing the corridor dipping cleanly under Parker's ground. The two data sets contradicted each other completely. Either Rick's data was outdated, or Parker had access to information no one else was supposed to see. When both men arrived before the board, the atmosphere crackled. Digital models collided with weathered journals. Accusations flew. Geological truth fractured into two incompatible realities. The board tried to regain control, but failed. With no legal clarity left, they invoked the last option Yukon law allowed, a provisional extraction test. Whoever physically exposed the corridor first would own it. No appeals, no delays. Machines would decide. The valley erupted into motion. Parker cut with surgical precision, recalibrating constantly, shaving the earth layer by layer. Rick went vertical, driving a single, deep test hole straight into the heart of the predicted channel. Both crews pushed equipment to its limits. Then it happened. Parker's system roared as boulders coated in visible gold slammed through his plant. At the same moment, Rick's drill erupted, blasting black sand and coarse nuggets skyward. Two massive discoveries, simultaneous and undeniable. But proof wasn't enough. Timing was everything. Two trucks raced toward Dawson, the season's fate rattling inside. In the end, it came down to 17 minutes. Parker's samples arrived first, granting him full extraction rights. Rick's ban was overturned and his geology proven correct, but the gold was legally Parker's. Rick won the truth. Parker walked away with the $75 million jackpot, and the question still hangs in the air. Was this just faster execution, or was the game decided long before the drills ever hit the ground? Parker Schnabel walked away with $75 million. So was it smart execution, or a system tilted toward the biggest player? Like, subscribe, and tell us what you think. Does Rick deserve another shot, or is possession really 9/10 of the law?